Yeah, as Pesach is coming close, I was thinking instead of giving one long talk, it's a talk episode, a running commentary on the Haggadah Shel Pesach. So I hope you'll be okay with that. We're all preparing for the Seder. We call the what we do on the first night of Pesach, we call a Seder. It's referred to as such by Rishonim already. Seder Shel Pesach. In Rashi's Talmidim wrote 15 simonim, Kaddish, Urchatz, Karpas, etc., which we announce before we even begin the program, from Kaddish, till the end. So obviously there's a special emphasis on order, on Seder. It's not just what we do, but it's doing this in the proper order. It would seem that on this night when we begin our journey as a nation, as a people, we are taught the significance and the importance of Seder. The Mashgiach Rabbi Yeruchim in the Das Torah in Parshas Bamidbar has an arichis about the importance of Seder, and he says. And I'll read to you what it says there. Ha'ericha Torah kol kach be'inyan hadgolim. V'hizhira b'hazhoros chamuros al shmiras chukoiseya. In spite of the fact that originally, it was only meant to be for a few days because they were going to go into Eretz Yisrael right away, if not for the sin that kept them in the midbar for 40 years. So the Golim was really all about where the various Shvatim should be stationed during this short time. In the end of Parshas Emor, she'omad v'gideif al shelohi nichuhu lita oholoi b'toich machanedon, which, by the way, was the last of all the machnas. Yeah, and he was omad v'gideif, because he wasn't allowed to be noitea holoi b'toich machanedon. V'oid matzinu in Arochin daf Yud Aleph shemeshoirer sheshir, that a Levi that has the job to sing, and he instead closes the gates, chayiv misa. V'lechore mabekach halo shneihem mikdusha achaseim. They're both Leviim, shneim b'nei Levi. Ve'ein loymar hatam, that because he's doing the closing of the gates, he's not doing the Shira. He says it's not true, even if he does the Shira in the time of Shira, but nevertheless, he also helps his friend close the gates. He's Chayiv Misa. No. What's the big deal? So he says like this, Ani nischanachti bekelem. Yeah, I was raised and educated in Kelem. Mokoim shom hoyu zehirim ma'oid be'inyan shel Seder. They were very careful with Seder. Hasabo zatzal, the altar from Kelem, hoyo koyes. He would be upset. Im lo ha'emidu es hakisei b'mekoimoi. Ubediuk, k'moy al maisa dechilul Shabbos. Sounds kind of extreme. He says that if the kisei doesn't say his kisei or anybody's kisei in the Beis Medrash wasn't exactly where it belongs, he was upset. Kemoy al ma'aser dechilul Shabbos. He says that the altar never looked to the side. If he would have to see something on that side, he would turn his whole body. Everything was planned and premeditated, and nothing happened by chance. He says that the Alter said that Seder is like the tie on a chain that has pearls on it. He says, Avada, that knot is not as important as the pearls. But if that knot comes apart, all the pearls will fall to the ground and they'll be lost. So Seder is what holds it all together. He said, Kain Inyan HaSeder. Seder hu hashomer kol tov sheba'olam. That's what preserves all good in the world. Afal pi shehu la'atzmai einenu ela davar tafel. Im ha'adam hu mesuder, if a person is mesuder, oz ha'torah v'ha'tfilah v'chol ha'mitzvahs shaloi shmurim heim u'betuchim b'kiyumam. Then his Torah will be preserved, his mitzvahs will be preserved, and they'll be long-lasting. V'im lav chas v'sholem kol ha'margoliyos yiplu arza. And he says, Tzorech adam lokum mishinosei b'zman kavua. A person should wake up in the morning at his man kavua, lehispalel b'zman kavua, lahaschil limudoi b'zman kavua, v'chein lifsoik milimudoi tzorech li is b'zman kavua. And here he says something astounding. He says that the Alta said, in the name of Reb Chaim Volozhin, that Kishemagia ledugma sho yud beis, when it's 12 o'clock at night, and that was the time that you made up your mind to finish your Seder Limudoi. Tzorechu lifsoik bein tevas omar letevas rova. You should say omar, and he says v'tevas rova yeniach ad laseder habola mocha. Yes, so you cut the Seder exactly where it was planned. Ein l'shanois ha-Seder, afilu im yiramu v'yivriku, sphere of the lightning and thunder around you, Seder is Seder. And he says that kol abriya kain misnaheges b'sidur noira. If anything would go out of place and out of order in the Seder habriya, the world would fall apart. And so also in the life of every individual, Seder is essential. And then he says, Royim onu umois. We see nations, asher yesh lahem mailas ha-Seder, that they have the maila of order. V'hu omnam hasiba lahem l'shleimus b'ta'asiyah u'b'mada. That their success in industry and in science is based on the fact that they have Seder. He's obviously referring to the Germans. V'im mailas hasidur oise kol kach gdoilos b'dvorim gashmiyim. If we see that order does such great things in the material world, so he says, Kal v'choyme shemaylas hasidur tifal gedoylois vaday kishenishtamish boy beruchnius. And then he says, so based on this, you understand why the Torah makes such a big deal about the Seder of the Dgolim and where each Shevet should be, and why a change in the Seder is such a terrible thing, and that's why Meshorer Shashir is Chayiv Misa. You know, in the Halal Haggadah in Tilim, we say La'oisei Orim Gedolim Kili Olam Chasta. Hashem created the great lights. Kili Olam Chasta. Es Hashemesh lememsheles bayoim Kili Olam Chasta. Es Hayoreach v'koichavim lememshelos baloilo Kili Olam Chasta. L'chora, I mean, Orim Gedolim includes the Shemesh and the Yoreach v'koichavim. So why do we, after we already said, we talk about as Hashemesh l'memsheles bayoim kili olam chastoi, and the Yerech v'koichavim l'memsheles balaylo kili olam chastoi. Now, Weiss that said the Alter for Slabotke, that from here we see that just as much as we need to thank for the creation of the Ma'oros, we need to thank for their organization, for the Seder, that the Shemesh is l'memsheles bayoim, and the Yerech v'koichavim is l'memsheles baloilo. So this is all about the importance of Seder. So it's no wonder that on the night of Yetzias Mitzrayim, which is the night of the birth of the Jewish people, as we read in Yecheskel Kapitel Tez Zayin, so we immediately emphasize the importance of order, of Seder. You know, many people suffer from disorders. What's a disorder? I mean, a person can have all the capacities, but if it's out of order, if it's a bit too much of this or too little of that, or it's just disorganized, I mean, so he's suffering emotionally and mentally. So order is really what holds it all together, and that's why we're being taught the importance of Seder. But nevertheless, it's an interesting nikud over here, because not always and not in everything Does order rule? We have a klal, ein seder l'mishnah. There's no order. Even in Torah Shebiksav, we find the concept of ein, mukdem, u'ma'ucher b'Torah. L'chayra, we would expect that in learning, seder is the most important, even critical. And nevertheless, ein seder l'mishnah. On the other hand, the night of Yetzias Mitzrayim is a night of miracles. Miracles are outside of the order, outside of the natural order. They break the rules. The night of Yetzias Mitzrayim was the most chaotic night in the history of our people. Ki b'chipozoin yotzasa me'eretz Mitzrayim. The Haggadah Rambam says, "B'bihilu yotzu aveiseinu Mitzrayim." It was a bahola, and dafke here we conduct a seder. So it would seem that in Limud HaTorah, which l'chayra is logical and organized, there's a chash that it will be taken as only logical. And therefore, there's a need to emphasize the dimension that's beyond logic, that's beyond seichel, that's above seder. The lack of seder enhances the experience of the learning. You know, a yid starts learning. The Gemara says, when is that? Oh, it's Seisek Eichavim. So why doesn't the Tana say Seisek Eichavim? Because Milsag Avorcha Kamash Malon. That's the experience of learning, right? So it's not so organized. It's dafka sometimes disorganized in order that you shouldn't take it just as a methodical mahalach hadvar. On the other hand, nisim, miracles that are outside of the order, we need to learn them. We need to make the experience into a learning experience in order that it should have a long-lasting effect on us. Only through the Seder can we hold on to the experience and to the spontaneous awakening. You know, like we say on Rosh Chodesh, we begin the Kriya with the Kriya of the Tamid. And we say it's the Oilas HaChodesh Asher Oilas HaTamid. Because Chodesh is renewal. Renewal is very important, but it has to be attached to the Tamid, to consistency. Right? So it's the Oilas HaChodesh Asher Oilas HaTamid. Yidden are always juggling between these two things. I mean, between improvising and being organized and being methodical. Because if it's just Seder, you can become a robot. But if it's just experience, yeah, you become you lose touch with the Gufei Torah. So it's the Seder is emphasized on the night of Yetzias Mitzrayim, and the non-Seder is emphasized in the learning. Okay, so now the first of the 15 Simonim is Kadesh. You know, Kiddush of Yom Tov is noyeg every Yom Tov. Every Yom Tov. It's not something that's unique about the Seder of Pesach. But nevertheless, there is something different about the Kiddush on the night of Pesach than any other Kiddush. Because, you know, the halacha is like Shmuel in Pesachim Daf Kof Aleph, that Kiddush has to be b'mekoim suda. B'mekoim suda literally means in the place. You can't go to another place to do the suda. However, the Ramah in Orach Chaim Siman Reish Ayin Gimel brings in the name of the Maharil, v'tzorich le'echol b'mekoim Kiddush la'alter. You need to eat in the place of the Kiddush immediately. Aval b'lav hachi afila b'mekoim Kiddush eina yotzeh. If you wait too long, and he doesn't even say how long, it's mashma if it's not immediately. So you lost the Kiddush. Yeah, the Kiddush has to be b'makom suda la'alter. Asoy zok the Maharil and asoy paskin the Ramah. Now, you know, there's a Chuvas Ginas Vrodim classic tshuva sefer from one of the Sfadish Gdolim of 200 years ago. He disagrees with the Maharil, and he writes it can't be true because you see that on Pesach night there a long time passes between the Kiddush and the actual Suda. We say the Haggadah, and we spend a lot of time until we get to the Moitzi Matzah. So it must be that Kiddush just has to be in the place of the Suda, but it doesn't have to be immediately. There's already a discussion in Tosfos in Psachim Daf Kov Gimel that there's a problem with the Kiddush B'Makom Suda on the night of Pesach because Tosfos held that the Haggadah should be a hefsek. Tosfos says, no, the Haggadah is not a hefsek. But Tosfos wasn't talking about the time. Tosfos was talking about the Haggadah being a hefsek. But according to the Maharil, that it has to be la'alter, so there's a problem. Let it be that the Haggadah is not a hefsek, but the time is a hefsek. Maybe we can say that, in spite of the fact that we can say that Yutaka usually need to do the Suda immediately. However, over here, since the Haggadah not only is not a hefsek, but it's a machaber, it connects the Kiddush with the Suda. Why? Because from when we make the Kiddush, we're oisik in the Haggadah, which is lechem she'oinin all of dvarim harbe. Yeah, the Haggadah is really about the matzah. So since we're being oisik in the inyan of the Suda, in the entire saying of the Haggadah, so that keeps the Kiddush connected with the Suda, maybe we can say. But nevertheless, the question is, why is it that, I mean, on the night of Pesach, when we do everything, we try to do everything in the most perfect way, Punkte Kiddush comes out that it's not so poshut that it's a Kiddush B'Makom Suda. So, Kiddush B'Makom Suda, it's mavur from Rishonim. We won't get into it now, that it has a dual meaning. I mean, it has there are two elements in Kiddush B'Makom Suda. One is that the Kiddush has to be attached to the Suda. If the Kiddush is not attached to the Suda, the Kiddush evaporates. The other is that the Suda needs to be attached to the Kiddush. And a Suda that's not attached to the Kiddush, you're not allowed to eat. And the meaning of this is that a Suda that's not b'makom Kiddush, v'koroso l'shabes oineg. An oineg, a pleasure, that's not attached to the v'koroso, that's not attached to the Kiddush, might bring us down, might cause us to sink into Taivas Olam Hazeh. So we want the Suda, the Oinig, to be attached to the Kiddush, On the other hand, the Kiddush needs to be attached to the Suda, because the Tachlis of the Kedusha is not that it should remain in the abstract, but that it should uplift real life. It should uplift real life. Even more so when Kedusha is in the abstract, it might be just, it might be just something unreal. It might be a dimion, and it might fall apart when you leave this state of being and you enter regular life. So there has to be, the Kiddush has to be connected to the Suda has to be connected to the Kiddush. But nevertheless, that the connection between the Kiddush and the Suda is not simple. There's a sakona. Kiddush can't be in the Suda. It has to be before the Suda. That if you're in the middle of eating, the halach is mafsikin l'shabosais. You peres mapa u'mekadesh. In order that the Suda should come liyikra the Shabbata, which means that there has to be, the Kiddush has to have its own space. Because if the Kiddush is in the Suda, the Kiddush won't be a Kiddush. So it's talking that for this reason, it's nishtana halayla hazem mikol halaylos. Because b'chol dor v'dor chayav adam liris es atzmai, ki'ilu hu yotza ata mishibud Mitzrayim, as the Rambam says. So in the beginning, when we're leaving the Memtes Shari Tumah, we're not yet capable of entering the Suda immediately after the Kiddush. We need a bit of a hefsek in order to make sure that the Kiddush is a Kiddush. The Kiddush is removing ourselves from Olam Hazeh, connecting with the Rabbeinu Shalom. The Suda is entering the Olam Hazeh. We can't, on the first night, we can't yet move so quickly from the Kiddush to the Suda because the Kiddush won't have its identity. And therefore, on this first night, we have a hefsek zman, and we're oinin all of dvarim harbe, and we engage in the Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim before we begin the Suda. The same thing we find actually by the Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach is the only korban that's not nechal biyoim hakrovase. There's a hefsek between the avodas hakorban and the achilas hakorban, which also might have to do with this idea that at the moment of Yitzhak, you have to have a space for the avodah, that it should be on its own, and only then engage in the achila, even if it's achilas kochim. You know, we say, Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol, l'seis gedula l'yoyse bereishis, shelo yasanu kegoyei arotzes, v'lo yisamanu k'mish b'chois adam, shelo yisam kol keinu kahem v'goyer aleinu k'chol amayim shehein, mishtachavim lohev v'lorik, anachnu, korim mishtachavim v'ayim l'sei melech malchi amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, in the first half of the Aleinu, we're, so to speak, separating ourselves from everyone, and we're saying that we are the only ones that serve the Rabbeinu Shalom. All the rest, the mishtachavim laheva v'lorik. Okay. Comes the second half of the Aleinu. Al keina kaval Hashem al keina liris meher b'seferes uzecha lahavi gelu menoris v'lim koris yikreis l'sakei noilom b'malchus shakai v'chol b'nei basa yikru b'shmecha lahafnei selecha kol rishayoris yakiru v'yedu kol yoshvei sevel ki lechas sichre kol berach t'shav kol Hashem. And all of a sudden, we're including the whole world under the umbrella of Malchus Shamayim. But so the pshat is like this: Avada, our long-term hope is that everyone will be included. But if we begin with that long-term hope and we don't establish our independent, unique identity, it will never happen. We need to first establish the Oleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol. We need to separate ourselves, develop our own identity, and only when we're secure with our own identity can we reach out and be oisik in l'sakein oilam b'malchus shakai v'chol b'nei baso yikru b'shmecha. So that's like the connection between the Kiddush and the Suda. In the beginning, the Kiddush has to have its own space, and then we can enter the Suda. Okay. Anyway, Urachatz, you know, the Urachatz is this Natilas Yadayim, is geboit on the halacha. The Gemara brings in Pesachim, Daf Kuf Tezvav. Kol davar shetibulei b'mashke requires Natila. So since we're going to dip the karpas in the salt water, it requires Natila. But Taisus over there says that Bizman Hazeh, shekulonu tmei mesim, a davar shetibulei b'mashke does not require Natilas Yadayim. So says the Tur in Siman Tafai Gimel, the name of the Goyim, and Rashi. The Goyim holds the halacha that even Bizman Hazeh, there's a chiyuv to be noitel yadayim for a davar shetibula b'mashke, but the Magen Avram says that there is no chiyuv Bizman Hazeh. So if there is no chiyuv Bizman Hazeh, so manishtano halaylo hazeh, that we do netilas yadayim for the karpas. You know, when Nadav Avihu died, it says in the pasuk in Parashat Shmini, "Vayikra Moshe el Mishael ve'el el Tzafon b'nei Uziel doid Aharon vayom aleim kirvu se'ues achechem me'es pnei hakodesh el michutz lamachnes." So he called on Mishael ve'el Tzafon, which were the first cousins of Nadav Avihu, instead of the brothers, instead of Elazar v'Isamar, and he asked them to carry out Nadav Avihu's bodies. So the Dazakeinim Ibali Atoisis, he says like this: Itmer b'Toras Koyanim mikan she'ein haKoyanim metamal l'meisa. From here we learn that Koyanim are not allowed to be metamal l'meisa. Sha'arei Elazar v'Yisamar lo nitmu lahem. As we see that the brothers Elazar v'Yisamar, since they were Koyanim, they were not metama to Nadav Avihu. This is what it says in the Toras Koyanim. Asks the Toisis v'teima Shaharei b'mokem achem atzinu b'feirush ha'kohenim muzar maltemis mes. The ksiv, it's before your pasuk in Parashas Emor. Lenefesh lo yitama ba'amav. So what does the Teres Kohenim say that from here we learn that Kohanim are not allowed to be mitama l'meisim? It's a before your pasuk that Kohanim are not allowed to be mitama l'meisim. Va'oid elozavi samar Kohanim et yoitim hoy. V'lama lo yinetz mula achayim. In other words, it's true that Kohanim are not allowed to be Matama L'Mason, but a Kohen Hedyot is Matama to the Shiva Krovim, and Elazar Summer were brothers. So why couldn't they be Matama? The Yeshloimar, so he says, Echodim Turetzes B'chavet, to the Hachikoma. The Hachikoma. That what he's saying, Mikan Sha Kohanim Ein Matamin L'Mason, Hainu Kohanim had Yoitim B'Yoim Moshchosam. Here we learn a halacha that a Kohen Hedyot, on the day that he has his Meshicha for Kohuna, Yesh Lahem Din Kohanim Gdoilim. A Kohen Hedyot B'Yoy Moshchosoi has a din of a Kohen Gadol. V'chein Pirish Arav B'chor Shor, Gabi Roshechem Al Tifra'u. The Afagav the Kohanim Hedyoitim Lo Yehuzaru Al Priyo Frima, the Metamin Hein L'Kreveim, B'Yoy Moshchosem Areim Ke Kohanim Gdoilim. V'nirali Zoktois is the Hainu D'Ksiv B'Sefer D'Kroki Shemen Mishchas Kodesh Aleim. That on this day, that Shem and Mishchas Kodesh Aleim, they have a din like a Kohen Gadol, and they're not allowed to be Matama even for the Shiva Krovim. So, could be that in the beginning of our journey, on the first day, Pesach, when we were born as a people, and we're supposed to re-experience that every year. So, on the first day, even the Kohen Hedyot is a Kohen Gadol. So, therefore, on this night, the night of the birth of the Jewish people, we're knowing with all the chumras and the dikdukim, even if later we won't be able to hold on to this madrega, but at least we start on the first day with this madrega. Okay. Now, Karpas, the Gemara says, in Psachim Daf Kuf Yudal, Kadesha Yishalu Atinoikos. But we don't find an answer to this question. In Avodah Mayinu, there's an answer to all the questions, but where's the answer to the question of Matbilin Shtei Pa'amim? It could be that the message is that not every question has an answer. And it's not so terrible, if you're left with a kasha. The Maisa with the Rogat Shover, that somebody asked him a shaila, and he wrote him that he has a problem with the Tosfos, and he can't learn weiter. He can't continue until he answers him. So he wrote him a letter with the Rogachover used to write, ayin over here, look in this Tosfos, look in that Tosfos, look in that Tosfos. And he looks in all the Tosfos, and then he sees that not one of the Tosfos has anything to do with what he's asking. So he wrote back to the Rogachover. So Rogachover told him, listen, look, in each one of these Tosfos, and the Tosfos before had a kasha, and he didn't answer it. I just wanted to show you that if the Tosfos left the previous Indian with a kasha, he continued. So, a kasha is not the end of the world. So the pshat is the karpas, we don't give him an answer. So you could be left with a question. Dark yachatz, we break the matzah in order to have the dark shel ani beprusa. And that's why we eat the matzah as a prusa. Why we break it at the Seder. This is a discussion for on its own. But I just want to know, why do we put the bigger part away for later, for the Afikomen? It could be that the Yoni that has emotional intelligence, he's darker beprusa, obviously, because he's worried that he won't have what to eat later, but he puts the bigger part away for later. He doesn't eat the bigger part now. So the darker shalani beprusa is always the smaller prusa. The bigger prusa he leaves for later. And in general in life, patience pays off. If you're those that are willing to wait, get more. So that's why we put the bigger part for later. Okay, so Magid is already the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. The whole Haggadah is called Haggadah based on the Magid. But before we start with the Magid itself, and it's interesting that this is under the caption of Magid, we say, Holach mo'anyo diacholu avasona ba'ara de Mitzrayim kol dichfin yesei v'yechol kol ditzrich Yesei ve'yifsach. So in Rishonim there are two ways to learn lachma anyo di acholu av hosono ba'arad Mitzrayim. According to most mefarshim, we're talking about the matzah that we ate as we left Mitzrayim at the moment of the Geula, on that night when it was loy hispik on the day. Shaloy hispik b'tzeikam shel avoseinu before chatzos after chatzos. Shaloy hispik b'tzeikam shel avoseinu lahachmitz at sheniglo aleim melech malchi amlochim hakadosh baruch hu gola. So halachma anya, according to this, really means mistama a lechem she'oinen alav dvarim harbe. But it's really not a bread of affliction or poverty, or as we'll see. But in any case, this is the matzah as the symbol of redemption. The lachma anya diacholu avasar b'arad Mitzrayim. But what's the connection between lachma anya diacholu avasar b'arad Mitzrayim, kol dichfin yesev v'yechel? How do the words flow? I mean, what's the connection between the lachma anya diacholu avasar b'arad Mitzrayim and the kol dichfin yesev v'yechel? So it could be, it says in the Rosh, in the Piskei Rosh, and also in the Seder Leil Pesach, in the end of the Rosh, that the reason that we have 3 matzahs in the Ka'ora is that it's keneged the trumas lachmei toida of matzah. In other words, there were 30 lachamim of matzah in the toida, and 3 matzahs went to the kohen. That's the trumas lachmei toida. And since Arba Chayovim Lahoidos, and one of them is the Yotzei Mi Beis HaAsurim, and since we now left Mitzrayim, which is a Beis HaAsurim, Memela, we are like Mechuyev and a carbon toides. So these 3 matzahs represent the Lachmei Toida. In Lachmei Toida, we find an interesting thing, that in spite of the fact that it's Kochim Kalim, which normally is eaten for Shnei Yom and V'layla Echad, Lachmei Toida, and the carbon Toida is only eaten for a Yom V'layla. On the other hand, there are so many lachamim to be eaten, so it's a ribui of food and a miut of zman achila. So the Sforno says that it's because we want the bailim should not be able to eat it himself. He should have to invite his neighbors. So yispar semanes, like we say, v'yiroi memuhu b'kahal om. But nevertheless, I ask, there could have been a tzivui that he should be mefarsim the nes. He should make a declaration in front of 10 people. Why do we have to set up a situation where he can't eat his taida himself and he has to invite other people? So it could be, we have in general a chiyuv of a halachta b'drachav to emulate the ways of the Rebbeinu Shalom. We say, Mahu nikra rachum af ato heyei rachum. Mahu nikra chanun af ato heyei chanun. No. But probably when a person personally experiences the Rebbeinu Shalom's mercy and chesed, that's a special mechayiv that I should act in that way towards others. Beyond the general chiyuv of mahu af ato, when the Rebbeinu Shalom actually treats you with chesed, it's a mechayiv that you should treat others with chesed. And therefore we say, Hol lachma anyo diacholu avasana b'arad Mitzrayim. Yeah, this is the bread of redemption. And when I look at this, and this matzah is really the symbol of lachmei toida. So just like in the lachmei toida, I fed it to other people because the Torah was mamayit as man achila and was marba the lachamim in order that I should have to feed it to other people. So also on the night of Pesach, kol dichfin yesev v'yechel, I want to act in the way that the Rebbeinu Shalom acted towards me. Okay, so that's according to the pshat that lachma anyo diachol avasana b'arad Mitzrayim is talking about the matzah of the geula as the symbol of redemption. But there's another pshat, because literally when you read it, it sounds like lachma anyo diachol avasana b'arad Mitzrayim, not just at the moment of the geula. So in the Orchos Chaim, which is one of the Rishonim, he says, yes, shoyalim. V'aloi achar Yitzias Mitzrayim hoyo shohitziu b'tzeikom tzroros b'simloisom v'yoifu es abotzik. V'amar Rabbi Yosef ha'ezoivi b'shem Rabbi Avram Ibn Ezra Zal shohoyo shavui b'hoidu, that the Ibn Ezra said that he was held captive in India. And v'hoyu ma'achilun oisei lechem matzah. In the jail, they fed him matzah. V'loi nosnu lo la'olam chametz. They never gave him chametz. V'atam, b'pnei she'enoi mis'akel b'mehero. It doesn't digest fast kechametz, as chametz. V'yaspik mimenu ma'at. He keeps a person full for a longer time. V'kach hoyu ha'mitzrim oisim liYisrael. So the Ibn Ezra, based on that experience, said that probably the Mitzrim fed the Jews matzah. And when we say Kol Holach Ma'anya the Acholu Avasana Ba'ad Mitzrayim, what we actually are talking about is the bread of affliction that our forefathers were fed in Mitzrayim for the 210 years of Shibud. In the Sforno in Parshas Re'eh, he says on the pasuk, Lo soichal olav chometz shivas yomim toichal olav matzis lechem oini ki b'chipozin yotzosa. He says lechem oini lechem shoyu oichlem ba'oini. V'sheloi hoyolem pnai lahashis isosa matchetech mat mipnei noiksim otzim. That when they were in Mitzrayim, they were eating matzah because of the shibud. The Ramban over there says that it's meramis to shnei dvarim. It's meramis to the matzah that we ate in Mitzrayim when we were enslaved, and it's meramis to the matzah that we ate as we left Mitzrayim. So there are two dimensions to the matzah. There are two sides to every matzah. But it's interesting that the Hashgacha Elyoina brought about that this same matzah that we ate for 210 years as slaves, this same matzah we actually ate when we finally had the opportunity to eat bread. It turned out that because of the haste of the Geula, and we once again ate matzah. Once again ate matzah. What is this supposed to mean? Why was the Hashgacha Mesavev that we should eat the same matzah that we were eating for the last 210 years when we leave Mitzrayim for a different reason? So probably the message is that the yesod of redemption is really not in the change of the objective circumstances, but in the change of our subjective attitude towards circumstances. And therefore, one can have the same circumstances, but be liberated. We could eat the same matzah, but you know what? Now the matzah has a totally different taste. Until now, we were eating matzah nebuch because that's what they were feeding us. Now we're eating matzah because we're in such a rush to get out of Mitzrayim, and we're so excited about the redemption that we don't even have time to allow the dough to rise. So it's the same matzah, but with a totally different meaning. So it's the mental switch that makes all the difference. And that's the message, that the lechem oini became the lechem of cheros. There's a famous story with the Baal Shem Tov that once he was going on his way to davening and he meets the water carrier. Yes, his name was Getzel. Yes, his name was Gimple, but it doesn't matter what his name was. He meets the water carrier on the way to Shul before Shachris, and he asks him, "Nu, Reb Getzel, how are you?" So he says, "Rebbe, how am I?" Don't ask. I'm getting old. I don't have the strength that I used to have, and I have to carry the jugs of water on my shoulders. I'm breaking. My wife, for the last 2 years, she's ill. A few times she almost died. I have 2 daughters. I need to marry them off, and I can't find them a shidduch. So, it's terrible. The Baal Shem Tov tries to give him a little chizik, but it's not working. The Baal Shem Tov goes to daven. The next day, he meets the same water carrier in the morning on the way to davening. He asks him, "Getzel, how are you?" So he says, Rebbe, let me tell you something. I'm not as strong as I used to be, but I can still carry the water. Most of my friends, Either they're sick in bed or they died already. And my wife, she's sick for 2 years, but she almost died. But she's alive, Baruch Hashem, when we're here for each other. I have two daughters. They're so talented and so smart. I can't find them a shidduch. So things are great. So the Baal Shem Tov said, that with this was Nesyashiv to me, Toisus is kasha. Because Toisus asks a kasha. That Toisus asks a kasha, that in one place it says, Mezoinoisov shel Adam ksuvin loy me Rosh Hashanah vad Rosh Hashanah. That is decreed on Rosh Hashanah what a person should get in terms of his parnasa for the whole year. On the other hand, it says, Adam nidoin b'chol yom. A person is judged every day. So the Hashem says, it seems that what he should get is decided on Rosh Hashanah. But how he should take it is a new decision every day. Yes, so it's in the same circumstances. One can live as a free man and one could live as an enslaved person. We say, Vayotzienu misoicham lecheirus oilam. It's everlasting. It's eternal cheirus. Even though since Mitzrayim, we've been through many, many difficult situations, and many goliaths. But nevertheless, we have the ability to be toyim the time of cheirus, even in the lachmanya. Even in the bread of affliction, we can taste cheirus. There's a unique halacha in Hilchis Pesach that chometz is also bal yiro bal yimotze, but bebittel bal masagi. Bebittel bal masagi. It's a fascinating thing. If I mentally decide that the chometz is in my mind like afre the ara, it's ois chometz. So what does that tell you? It's all in the mind. It's mind over matter. You can actually, the chometz can be there, but it's not. And that's really what Geula is about, the ability to rise over circumstances. So we look at the enslavement in Mitzrayim also as something positive. In other words, we see the lachma anyo, the bread of affliction and poverty. We now look at it differently. And I'll explain to you what I mean. It says in the pasuk in Parashat Mishpatim, "Va'atem yida'atem es nefesh hager, ki nefesh ha'yisem beretz Mitzrayim." You know the heart and soul of the outsider, because you were outsiders in Mitzrayim. So in Mitzrayim, we developed a sensitivity for the suffering of the outsider, the underdog, the one that's different. And that experience of being Gerim, gave us the ability to identify with those that don't fit in. And that's part of the Rechush Gadol. It says, V'achakach yetzu b'Rechush Gadol. And it's Mavur in the Arizal and others that it doesn't just mean in a material sense, a Rechush Gadol, but it means in a spiritual sense. We learned lessons. We acquired things in Mitzrayim in the spiritual sphere that we wouldn't have had without that. As the pasuk says, Mefurish in Parshas V'Eschanon, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, V'oitzi eschem mikur habarzel. The Shibud Mitzrayim is called Kur HaBarzel. Like Rashi says, it's a iron furnace in which you purify gold. So we were purified in Mitzrayim. The Shibud Mitzrayim actually is part of who we are. That's what made us become what we are. There are people that when they remember their slavery, it causes, they pity themselves. They feel that they want to spoil themselves. They demand reparations, but everybody needs to pay them for what they suffered. But we actually look back at our slavery, and we make a commitment. This bread of affliction, our forefathers ate in Mitzrayim, but we will make sure that nobody suffers like we suffered. We're going to see that kol dichfen yesei v'yechol, kol ditzrich yesei v'yifsach. We will share with others, and we will not let anybody suffer like we suffered. Right? So that's part of the So the lachma anya, the achola is a mechayev to take care of the kol dichfin. Be'emes, you see that in on Pesach, there's a special chiyuv of kimche de Pesach. It's mavur in the Ramos in Simon Tav Chav Tes. You know, it's beyond the chiyuv of regular tzedakah. It's and beyond the chiyuv of every yontif that you should see to take care of the ger yosem and almona. There's a special chiyuv on Pesach. You know, the goyin, they say, the Mishnah Berurah brings the Yerushalmi where it says before, but you know, the goyin, they say in the name of the goyin that matzos yei ochel shivas yomim, matzos shall be eaten. So in the Koil Eliyom, Parshas Boy, it says that this is a remez to kimcha de Pesach because it's not that you should eat, but it's that you should see that matzah shall be eaten. In other words, you should see that others should also have. Yeah, in any case, listen, the Haggadah is very long. We're not going to stay here all night. I just want to say one more thing, that Derech Shiloh Tshuva is one of the things that define the Sipur of Yetzias Mitzrayim of Leil Pesach. But you know that the Rambam, Perik Ches, Halacha Beis, in Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah says, "U'moizgin hakois hasheni, v'kan haben shoyel, v'oimer hakoirei manishtana halaylos emikol halaylos." So the Rambam says that v'oimer hakoirei, that the one that's saying the Haggadah after the ben is shoyel manishtana, the koirei repeats the question. The Chassam Sofer already writes in his Haggadah Shulchan Aruch that he doesn't know where the Rambam got it from. And what the meaning is. But I want to suggest that, when somebody asks you a question, there are two ways. One way is that you shoot out an answer right away, which can almost make him feel like, how silly was I that I asked that question? Right? So by answering in that way, you're actually not facilitating the growth of the ben, but you're actually bringing him down. Whereas there's another way, that the ben asks the question and the father says, you know what? Wow, that's an amazing question. Let me repeat it. So that's a way of embracing the question. And that's the message. Kan shoyel haben v'oimer hakoirei manishtana. That the koirei repeats the question in order to embrace the question and not put down the question. Anyway, the Eibush is a halfen that we should all have. I see we have a lot of, I wouldn't say new people because nobody's new, but people that aren't here that often. But I don't want to name them all because then, I don't know if that's like it's l'shevach, or it's l'gnai, or we don't have time really to name them all. But in any case, I wish you all a freilich and kosher and Pesach. If anybody has any comments, the time is now.